We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. The Asian Development Bank trimmed its economic growth forecast for developing Asia tonight, with China's pandemic lockdown slowing global demand and the Russian invasion of Ukraine seen as limiting the region's prospects. The Philippines has gained the commitment of the European Council on climate change mitigation and its support in addressing seafaring industry-related industries. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong christened two new type of submarines on the Republic of Singapore Navy at the ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems shipyard in Kiel, northern Germany.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And Umar Patek, a bomb maker in the battle blast that killed more than 200 people 20 years ago, apologizes after his early release from prison, which stoked the anger of the Australian government, survivors, and families of the dead. First in our news, the Asian Development Bank trimmed its economic growth forecast for developing Asia tonight, with China's pandemic lockdowns slowing global demand and the Russian invasion of Ukraine seen as limiting the region's prospects. The Philippines-based lender cut its 2022 forecast to 4.2%, down marginally from 4.3% projection made in September. Prospects for 2023 also grew dimmer, it said in a report, which lowered the region's growth forecast to 4.6% from 4.9%. Chinese lockdowns, the Ukraine war, and the slowing demand from developed economies for manufactured goods were the main causes. With its tough COVID restrictions and unstable property market, China, Asia's largest economy, is now forecast to grow 3% this year and 4.3% in 2023, compared with 3.3% and 4.5% respectively in the bank's September forecasts. On a positive note, the report said developing Asia will grow faster this year and next than the rest of the world, while suffering the least from spiking inflation. In tonight's other news, global trade is yet to reach almost $32 trillion this year. But inflation has reversed some of the gains made in recent months. Take a look. Now, that is according to UN Trade and Development Agency, or UNCTAD, whose analysts said that global growth turned negative during the second half of this year. The UN agency said that trade in goods and services is expected to reach $25 trillion and $7 trillion respectively by the end of the year. The downturn began in the third quarter of the year, with goods trading about 1% lower than from March to May. UNCTAD said that although services actually increased by 1.3% in the third quarter, both goods and services are expected to fall in value in the run-up to the end of the year. Meanwhile, the Philippines has gained the commitment of the European Council on climate change mitigation and its support in addressing seafaring industry-related issues. Now, this comes after the two leaders met at the Europa building, the seat of the European Council and the Council of the European Union, on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations European Union Commemorative Summit in Brussels, Belgium. In their meeting, President Marcos emphasized the vital role of ASEAN countries in the world economy, as shown clearly by their growth with systems already in place. ASEAN has increased its presence on the global stage through its efforts on regional economic integration and supply chain resilience, according to President Marcos. The chief executive also got an added boost of support in the country's bid to address issues in the country's seafaring industry, which is one of the top agenda of the Philippine leaders' visit to Brussels. The president said the country, quote, will kick the can on the road in order to prevent at least 50,000 Filipino seafarers employed by Europe-based shipping companies from losing their jobs. The country has been flagged by the European Maritime Safety Agency for deficiencies in seafarer training and education and risks being banned if they're not immediately addressed. Now, in response, the chief executive ordered the creation of an advisory board to address deficiencies identified by the EMSA and the Philippine Seafarers Education, Training and Certification System. Meanwhile, the European Council chief agreed with President Marcos on the need to operationalize the Green Fund on Climate Change and the Damage and Loss Policy. The Green Climate Fund was designated as an operating entity of the financial mechanism of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The GCF aims to encourage the paradigm shift towards low emission and climate resilient development by providing support to developing countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions while at the same time adapting to the effects of climate change. President Marcos Jr. also highlighted the importance of collaboration between governments and private sector, especially now that ASEAN member states are in a post-pandemic economic recovery and facing new challenges brought about by recent geopolitical tensions. Here's the president during his closing remarks at the 10th ASEAN-EU Business Summit. Take a look.
Geopolitical tensions. It is noteworthy to extend our appreciation to the ASEAN-EU Business Council for its continued support and engagement with ASEAN from the sectoral bodies up to the Leaders Forum and at that level. ASEAN has increased its presence on the global stage through the efforts on regional economic integration and supply chain resilience. The entry into force of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, the ongoing review of existing trade agreements, ASEAN's initiatives to facilitate trade of essential goods demonstrates the region's push to maintain an open, free, and fair trade. Moreover, with the participation of ASEAN members in mega trade deals such as RCEP, and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, ASEAN is well positioned to accelerate intra-regional trade and profit. ASEAN member countries continue to recognize the historical importance of the EU as a trade and investment partner to ASEAN. Thus, while the ASEAN-EU FTA remains a common long-term objective, economic cooperation initiatives will be prioritized on areas of mutual interest in order to bridge the gap and realize this long-term objective.
Now, as we heard there, the president said that ASEAN member countries will continue to recognize the historical importance of the EU as a trade and investment partner to ASEAN. Meanwhile, President Marcos and Brussels airport officials agreed to work on mounting direct flights between Manila and Brussels. The meeting was on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations European Union Commemorative Summit. The proposal to open the Manila-Brussels direct flight came from Brussels airport officials who showed great interest in gaining a foothold in the Philippines. Arnaud Feist, a chief executive officer of Brussels Airport Company, said the Manila-Brussels direct flight is a win-win for both countries. President Marcos, for his part, said opening a non-stop flight to Brussels serves as an opportunity for Filipinos who want to explore what Belgium and the rest of the Western Europe have to offer. He also pointed out that all capitals in Southeast Asia are within a few hours from Manila. And that, he said, is something that he would like to take advantage of and explore in terms of making the areas more accessible. Philippine Airlines officials, meanwhile, said that they are really interested in providing accessibility and connecting Filipinos to the whole European nation, as well as bringing more tourists from Europe to the Philippines. Stanley Ang, PAL President and Chief Operating Officer, said Now that is really the vision that they are excited to see, and that they want to improve the economic activities in the Philippines and in Europe. President Marcos Jr. is also pushing to strengthen the country's bilateral relations with Belgium with a new joint action plan. Now, the president has already met with King Philippe of Belgium to discuss areas where both countries could further cooperate. Now, during his meeting with the Filipino community on Sunday, the president said that he was looking forward to signing a Philippines-Belgium joint plan of action for next year. Let's listen in.
In this visit, I will have a royal audience with King Philippe, and I will be happy to share with him that the Philippines and Belgium have just commemorated 76 years of bilateral relationships this year. Our relationship have remained strong and based on shared values, common interests, and the good reputation that Filipinos have built, not only here in Europe, but all over the world. It will also be an opportunity to convey to the King that the Philippines intends to pursue a strategic partnership with Belgium in various fields. And to this end, we look forward to signing a Philippines-Belgium joint plan of action for 2023 to 27 that could further enhance bilateral cooperation, allow our two countries to discuss regional and global issues of mutual concern. Our ties with Belgium continue to flourish, not only because of G2G or government-to-government contracts, but because of the strong interpersonal linkages of the Filipino community with Belgians and other expatriates, whether through employment or marriage and family ties.
In tonight's other news, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong christened two new types of 218 SG submarines of the Republic of Singapore Navy at the ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems Shipyard in Kiel, northern Germany. But first, let's listen in.
Sicherheit und Stabilität auch im Indopazifik sorgen dafür, dass die internationale Ordnung insgesamt aufrechterhalten werden kann. Sie sind ein Schutz gegen Imperialismus und Kriegstreiberei. Russlands Krieg gegen die Ukraine ist ein Frontalangriff auf diese internationale Ordnung.
Now, much of the world trade passes through the Strait of Singapore in Southeast Asia. To secure that, Germany is now supplying more submarines. With the delivery of two more submarines, Germany is strengthening its strategic partnership with the Southeast Asian city-state of Singapore. Scholz called the arms aid for the small but rich Asian partner country a clear signal that Germany is thus taking responsibility for Singapore's security. The South China Sea is considered the most dangerous potential conflict spot in the Indo-Pacific region. There, China is at war with Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and the Philippines over islands, reefs, and sea areas. The island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own, also lies on the northeastern edge of the South China Sea. A Singaporean man has been jailed for selling nearly $1 million worth of strawberry milk and coffee to North Korea. Take a look. Hua Zhe-hee, 59, a former manager at the beverage company Poca International, was sentenced to 5 weeks in jail on Monday after he pleaded guilty. From 2017 to 2018, he sold beverages, including strawberry-flavored milk and coffee drinks, to several Singapore companies, knowing that they would be exported to North Korea for sale there. Now, he didn't earn any commission from the sales, but it allowed him to meet his monthly sales targets, according to court documents. The maximum punishment for exporting goods from Singapore to North Korea is a fine of up to 100,000 Singaporean dollars, or at least 74,000 US dollars, or 3 times the value of the goods exported, up to 2 years in jail, or both. Now, there have been several cases in recent years of companies and individuals from Singapore, a key trading hub and financial center, being prosecuted for supplying banned goods to the North. Umar Patek, a bomb maker in the Bali blast that killed more than 200 people 20 years ago, apologized after his early release from prison. And that stoked the anger of the Australian government, survivors, and families of the dead. Take a look.
Saya memohon maaf kepada seluruh warga Bali. Demikian pula permohonan maaf saya kepada korban dan keluarga korban, baik yang di dalam negeri maupun yang ada di luar negeri. Apapun negara mereka, apapun suku bangsa mereka, apapun agama mereka. Dan saya juga memohon maaf kepada warga Australia yang juga mengalami dampak yang sangat hebat dari kejahatan bom Bali yang telah terjadi itu. Dengan saya tetap menunjukkan komitmen saya untuk membantu pemerintah kesediaan. Artinya cukup saya tunjukkan dengan perbuatan.
Ya, itu.
Now, Patek was a member of an Al-Qaeda-linked group that detonated bombs at a bar and nightclub on the Indonesian resort island in 2002. And that killed 202 people, including 88 Australians, in Southeast Asia's deadliest militant attack. Patek was captured in 2011 after nearly a decade on the run and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, his release has angered survivors of the 2002 blast. Indonesian officials said he would be required to follow a training program until 2030, and his parole would be revoked if he committed a violation in that period. However, Australia has called for him to be closely monitored. Patek said he wants to devote himself to de-radicalizing other extremists. ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, Philippines, emphasized empowerment of children to prevent the violation of their right to a healthy and sustainable environment. Now, this was during the dialogue on the right to a healthy environment and climate change held on November 24 to the 25th in Bangkok, Thailand, organized by the Asia-Pacific Forum. During the 10th session of the Children's Rights and the Environment in Thailand, she said the regional bloc must employ a more encompassing lens in addressing challenges faced by this vulnerable group. She also pushed for recommendations that will promote and protect the rights of children, which is strengthening of advocacy work, providing access to justice and effective remedies, engaging the legislative and judicial bodies, and ensuring cross-pillar and cross-sectoral efforts. Now, EU leaders are meeting their counterparts from Southeast Asia for a summit in Brussels today, looking to bolster ties in the face of the war in Ukraine and challenges from China. Now, Europe is keen to boost trade with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which counts some of the world's fastest growing economies. There is a need for Europeans to reconnect with ASEAN, one of the most dynamic areas in the world, according to the French presidency. The EU has been on a diplomatic push to galvanize a global front against Moscow as its invasion has sent economic and political shockwaves around the world. But ASEAN's 10 nations have been divided in their response to the Kremlin's war on Ukraine. Singapore, for example, has gone along with Western sanctions on Russia, while Vietnam and Laos, which have close military ties to Moscow, have remained more neutral. Along with Thailand, they abstained from a UN vote in October, condemning Russia's attempted annexation of regions of Ukraine seized since February. The EU is keen to pitch itself as a reliable partner for Southeast Asia's dynamic economies. Amid the growing rivalry between Beijing and Washington also, the EU is set to unveil investments that could be worth 10 billion euros or $10.6 billion for the region, under its Global Gateway strategy designed as a counterweight to China's largest. ASEAN and the EU suspended their push for a joint trade deal over a decade ago, and Brussels has focused on striking agreements with individual members. And so far, deals with Vietnam and Singapore are in place, but the bloc is keen to make progress with ASEAN's largest economy, Indonesia, and to resume talks with Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, reminding you to stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.